Hey, what's happening, friend? Big Dog Ethan here. You're listening to WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and this is none other than the Unnatural State of Affairs. And, back from the dead, it seems. Apologies for my, I don't know what's the right word, absence, I guess. For the past couple of weeks, that last week before spring break was hectic as hell to the point where I had to cancel my show, and I didn't even get a chance to upload the show I did on February 22nd. So with that said, the upload that I'm going to make to the kennel, it's going to include at least a couple of segments from that show, because they're not, they were more, evergreen pieces, not terribly timely, and didn't really actually have much to do with the news. So one of them was just me reading a speech that I got some awards for at the Tennessee State Debate Championship with MTSU's debate team. And then the other piece, the other segment is a review of Ryan Grimm's new book that came out. Well, I say new, it's been at least 3 months now, but I read it over Christmas break. It's called The Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution. It was a really good read, so I had a lot of thoughts that I wanted to share about that book. So anyways, I'm going to have those two segments tacked on to the upload I'll be making to the kennel for this episode. But today, though, what I'm going to be doing, I've really just got two segments to do for you today. Of course, I'm going to be giving you updates on the plausible genocide in Gaza. There have been a lot of updates since I last came on the airwaves here. Of course, I'm going to give you recent casualty numbers, the updates to those. I'm also going to talk about Aaron Bushnell's self-immolation. It's a pretty sad story, in my opinion. And then I'm also going to talk about the movement to vote uncommitted for Biden in the 2024 presidential primary elections, and also I'm going to talk about Biden's slight shift since that movement began, and then finally in that segment I'll also talk about how Tennessee Congressional District 3 Representative Chuck Fleischman made some genocidal statements, and it was a pretty ugly interaction that he had with some protesters, so we'll be covering that as well. And then after that, I'm also going to talk about Murfreesboro Mayor Shane McFarland, because he is once again facing legal troubles right after the city of Murfreesboro just had to settle out of court with the American Civil Liberties Union over an ordinance that he was a major advocate for. So, with all that out of the way, let's get right into these updates on the plausible genocide in Gaza. All right, as always, we're going to start off with the new casualty numbers from the Euromed Human Rights Monitor. Obviously, they are not pretty at all. So we've got 73,300 injured. We've also got 39,178 killed. And among those dead, 35,490 of them are civilians. That is a 90.6% civilian death rate. As I've always said too, during these segments, to put that death rate into perspective, the Iraq Body Count Project estimates, their highest estimate is 70.1% civilian death rate resulting from the Iraq War. And again, that is their highest estimate whenever you divide the highest number of civilian deaths with the total violent deaths, including combatants. On top of that, whenever you do the math using Brown University's Cost of War project, you'll find that there was roughly a 28.8% civilian death rate that resulted from the Afghanistan war. And these wars were already notorious for the amount of damage inflicted upon civilians. So to see that Israel has racked up a 90.6% civilian death rate in just these 5 months. It is absolutely horrific, and it is absolutely insane. Also, a matter of fact, by the way, I recently compiled an infographic from my mobile storytelling class comparing the civilian death rates between all of the post 9/11 wars and the plausible genocide that's going on in Gaza right now. These are all based on that Brown University Costs of War project. For those watching the video version on my Substack, the Kennel, you can see on this infographic that it is clear as day. Israel is not giving two shits about civilian life. I mean, like, even just the difference between the Iraq War civilian death rate and the Gaza War, that alone is massive. And that is really the highest civilian death rate that resulted from any of the post 9/11 wars. So to see that the plausible genocide that's going on in Gaza right now is resulting in this many civilians being killed would suggest that, Israel may in fact be committing a genocide. Now, as I'm sure you've heard, this lack of concerns for civilians and international law recently troubled a young U.S. Air Force member to the point that he decided to self-immolate in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. His name was Aaron Bushnell. Now, before I go into detail on this tragedy, I need to make the obligatory, but still very important public service announcement here. If you are a student or really just anyone struggling with any mental health issues, MTSU offers counseling services at the Keithley University Center in room 326S. Now, granted, I believe that is only a resource for students, but even the website that I'm going to give you here in a sec does have general resources for anyone who may be listening this to check out. To find more information with a bunch of different resources for both emergencies and non-emergencies, you can find the counseling service, the counseling center's website at https://w1.mtsu.edu/counseling/index.php. You can also call them at 615-898-2670 from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Mondays through Fridays for more information. And this is what their page looks like for those who are watching the video version on my Substack. And of course, also have a link to not just this resource, but every source that I cite here in this video on the Substack page as well. On February 25th at about 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Aaron Bushnell started a Twitch live stream through his phone as he walked up to the Israeli embassy, saying, quote, "My name is Aaron Bushnell. I'm an active duty member of the U.S. Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." Unquote. He then proceeded to douse himself in a flammable liquid and set himself on fire, screaming, "Free Palestine." Those were his last words. He died later that day from his wounds. This background info on Bushnell comes from the Intelligencer on March 5th. Quote, "Bushnell was a 25-year-old member of the U.S. Air Force stationed at the Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio and originally from Whitman, Massachusetts. He joined the Air Force as an active duty member in May 2020 and has since worked in information technology and development operations. In a statement on Monday, the Air Force stated that he was a cyber defense operations specialist with the 531st Intelligence Support Squadron. Bushnell grew up in a religious group on Cape Cod called the Community of Jesus, whose former members have come forward alleging abuse and a rigid social structure. According to a family friend and former Community of Jesus member who spoke with the Washington Post, he was raised in a religious compound in Orleans associated with the group. The friend told the Post that young people in the Community of Jesus often joined the military, moving from, quote, one high control group to another high control group, unquote. Another friend told the New York Times that Bushnell left the church community in 2019. Friends who spoke with the Post say that while Bushnell was stationed in San Antonio, he was attending events for a socialist organization and delivered food to people on the street. Friends state that his contract with the military was to expire in May, and he was looking for a career transition. Following the police killing of George Floyd, they say he had become more open in his objection to the military. Quote, he said that kind of went from one extreme, the conservative beliefs that he had grown up around, to the opposite, forming his anarchist, anti-imperialist values, unquote, a friend in San Antonio told the New York Times. Quote, and he said it was a very quick shift, and he just said it went from one extreme to the other, unquote. Another friend in San Antonio told the BBC that though he was, quote, a little shy, unquote, he volunteered to hand out food and clothing for mutual aid groups. In late 2023, friends say he moved to Ohio as part of a military training program for transitioning out of active duty. I also want to note what I think was the best response to Bushnell's death. It's a February 26th article from CrimethInc, a left-leaning independent media outlet. I want to highlight a piece of it that I found quite moving. I'm going to scroll down here so I can show it on the screen. Aaron was the second person to self-immolate at an Israeli diplomatic institution in the United States. Another demonstrator did the same thing at the Israeli consulate in Atlanta on December 1st, 2023. It is not easy for us to know how to speak about their deaths. Some journalists see themselves as engaged in the neutral activity of spreading information as an end in itself, as if the process of selecting what to spread and how to frame it could ever be neutral. For our part, when we speak, we presume that we are speaking to people of action, people like ourselves who are aware of their agency and are in the process of deciding what to do, people who may be wrestling with heartache and despair. Human beings influence each other both through rational argument and through the infectiousness of action. As Peter Kropotkin put it, quote, courage, devotion, the spirit of sacrifice are as contagious as cowardice, submission, and panic, unquote. Just as we have a responsibility not to show cowardice, we also have a responsibility not to promote sacrifice casually. We must not speak carelessly about taking risks, even risks that we have taken ourselves. It is one thing to expose oneself to risk. It is another thing to invite others to run risks, not knowing what the consequences might be for them. And here, we are not speaking about a risk, but about the worst of all certainties. Let's not glamorize the decision to end one's life, nor celebrate anything with such permanent repercussions. Rather than exalting Aaron as a martyr and encouraging others to emulate him, we honor his memory, but we exhort you to take a different path, unquote. I feel like this piece lays a perfect guidance for how lefties should respond to this tragedy. I think it's best that they honor Bushnell's memory and acknowledge that his actions are simply a sign of the times. In the same way that, according to the comprehensive textbook of suicidology, a series of over 100 instances of self-immolation documented by the New York Times and London Times during Vietnam War protests represented the absolute horrors of our actions in the Vietnam War and the grief such actions inflicted on those civilians and also those U.S. citizens with a conscience. The same can be said of Bushnell's death. It's yet another sign of the unnatural state of affairs that we live in, where those in our government who are supposed to represent the interests of the people by conditioning aid to a nation that is violating international law on a daily basis instead chooses to gaslight its citizens by either spinning or blatantly ignoring those ongoing atrocities. Voters in a number of recent presidential primary elections have also been tired of this gaslighting and decided to organize a movement to vote uncommitted in the Democratic presidential primary. Michigan was certainly the epicenter for this movement. According to NPR, on February 28th, the movement, Listen to Michigan, started in Dearborn, Michigan, of which the majority of the population is, quote, of Middle Eastern or North African descent, unquote. Their goal? Get at least 10,000 people to vote uncommitted for Biden. Now, did they meet that goal? Yeah. yeah, they definitely did. They got over 100,000 people to vote uncommitted for Biden. On top of that, over 22,000 voted for Marianne Williamson, and another 20,000 voted for Dean Phillips. Now, admittedly, Phillips has been very wishy-washy on the issue, only saying on a Crystal Kyle and Friends interview that if the International Court of Justice ruled it is plausible that Israel is committing a genocide, he would call for a temporary ceasefire. Maybe I missed a tweet from him, maybe I missed a press release from him, but I have not seen that shift after the ICJ already decided that it is plausible that Israel is committing a genocide. But effectively, over 140,000 Democratic voters said no to Biden. Now, considering that Biden got 623,415 votes in the primary, that may seem like a drop in the bucket. However, if you also consider that, according to this same NPR article, Trump won Michigan in 2016 by just 10,000 votes, and if you consider that Biden won Michigan by 150,000 votes in 2020, this ain't looking good for the withering corpse in the White House. Things started looking worse for Biden after Super Tuesday last week. First, I have to say, I am disappointed in Tennessee's decision. Uncommitted only got 10,461 votes, according to the New York Times. That's only like 7.8% of the vote.
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
And of course, thanks to the authoritarian assholes at the Tennessee Democratic Party, there were no other candidates on the ballot. Side note, the TNDP still felt the need to congratulate Biden on winning the primary when he was the only person on the ballot. They made a tweet with like this, dramatic picture saying, congratulations to Joe Biden for winning the Tennessee Democratic presidential primary. I love that these status quo defending dipshits have no awareness about how authoritarian they are. Or maybe they do realize and are just gaslighting Tennessee Democrats. I'll let you decide on that one. That said, there were other states that voiced a resounding protest to Biden's handling the plausible genocide in Gaza. Uncommitted got over 50,000 votes in Colorado, or officially speaking, non-committed delegate got over 50,000 votes. Nearly 46,000 in Minnesota voted uncommitted. No preference got nearly 59. Bumping into the microphone there. No preference got nearly 59,000 votes in Massachusetts. And on top of that, Marianne Williamson got over 20,000 votes, and Dean Phillips got over 29,000 votes too. Oh, and this is interesting. Uncommitted got 910 votes in Hawaii, actually. Which that may sound very small compared to all the numbers I just cited, but that was nearly 30% of the Democratic vote, according to NPR. That is kind of interesting that Hawaii just has a much smaller number of Democratic voters, especially because Hawaii is a very Democratic state. But I should also note too, by the way, I do suspect that Biden's lacking response to the recent wildfires there over the past year may have played into this result too. But nonetheless, it is more evidence to suggest that Biden is going to struggle to get key voters to show up for him in November. Now, naturally, the Biden administration is seemingly attempting to respond to this. On March 3rd, again, perhaps in response to the success of the Listen to Michigan campaign, Kamala Harris called for a 6-week ceasefire in perhaps the most politician-y way one could think of. Now, side note, according to NBC News on March 4th, 3 anonymous U.S. officials and an additional former official said that the National Security Council watered the speech down, claiming it, quote, was harsher on Israel about the dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip and the need for more aid than were the remarks she ultimately delivered, unquote. This video is from PBS NewsHour.
And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire for at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
Oh my gosh. I love how she got everyone super hyped for like 2 seconds and then followed that immediate ceasefire call up with, for the next 6 weeks. We need an immediate ceasefire. Pause. For the next 6 weeks. Once again, we have another example of the Biden administration trying to do the age-old neoliberal tap dance of trying to find compromise on an issue in which there is a clearly correct answer. Oh, we have a horrible healthcare system in which 28 million Americans have no affordable access to care, according to the U.S. Census. Let's compromise by flooding private insurers with taxpayer money and force them to cover some treatments instead of establishing a single-payer system like every other developed country does that guarantees access to healthcare for all citizens. Oh, we're locking up millions of people for nonviolent drug offenses and failing to address a chronic mental health condition? Instead of decriminalizing all drugs and establishing a comprehensive federal drug rehab program, let's just reschedule cannabis to Schedule III and call it a day. Oh, we're aiding and abetting what could be considered a genocide? Instead of withholding all arms sales to the nation that's violating international law on a daily basis, let's just order a temporary ceasefire for some humanitarian aid to reach impacted civilians, and then allow that nation to continue the indiscriminate bombing after the 6 weeks pass. It's an awkward, flat-footed tap dance, and it's certainly not entertaining Democratic voters either. Biden claimed in a rare MSNBC interview on Saturday that the sentiment that Israel is committing a genocide is, quote, not widely shared.
Medicine, everything needed, they're badly needed, and it's needed now.
You're heading to Michigan, where on the campaign trail, probably in the next few days, where more than 100,000 people voted uncommitted in the primary to protest your handling of the situation in Gaza. Some have said they will never vote for you. One told Charles Blow of the New York Times, and I'm quoting, as bad as Mr. Trump's rhetoric was and him putting a travel ban on 5 Muslim countries, he wasn't overseeing and actively arming a genocide. Those are tough words. What's your response to that widely shared sentiment?
It's not widely shared. You guys make judgments you're not capable of making. That's not what all those people said. What they said was they're very upset, and I don't blame them for being upset.
He can say that all he wants, but the facts simply don't back that up. A recent poll on January 19th from YouGov and The Economist shows that 35% of Americans overall think that Israel is committing a genocide, and another 29% were unsure. Furthermore, 50% of the people who voted for Biden in 2020 said they think Israel is committing a genocide. So, at the very least, though, we can expect our representatives in Congress to acknowledge this horrific reality, right? Right? I hope to God I'm hoping to God we can, right?
You can tell the Palestinians I will never support them.
Why do you support the genocide and all of the war crimes and collective punishment? Are you concerned about all the children?
Let me make
dying
it
in
clear.
Gaza?
Let me make it clear. Israel is our ally, will always be our ally.
Even if they commit war
and they are
crimes,
not
even
guilty
with-
of genocide, and I
Why?
will support Israel forever.
You will
Israel will stay your ally, even though they commit
Israel will be
genocide.
my
Even
that's
that.
your term.
Even
Can
when
you
they
explain-
kill,
That is your
even
term.
when they kill 30,000
What
kids,
they
that is
did
a
to the
statistic.
Israeli
That's a
people
statistic.
on October. Let me tell you a statistic.
Yeah, please.
Israel will exist. The Jewish state will exist.
That's not a
It will always
statistic.
be power, and that is for God
has absolutely
to do
nothing
and
to do with what
decide.
we're saying.
And I will
You are a
always support
supporter of
Israel.
genocide, sir. You're
I will
supporting
always
the
support
murder of
Israel,
little children.
and you can tell the Palestinians I will
I
never
am a
support
Palestinian
them.
myself.
Wow.
And I
I'm
will
a
tell
then
you,
say
I
it
will
to my
never
face.
support you.
Yeah?
I will tell you to your
And
face.
you want my cousins
Goodbye
to
to
die.
Palestine.
Goodbye
I will
to
support
Goodbye to
Israel.
Palestine.
Goodbye
You
to
wanna
watch
Palestine.
Palestine?
We will support Israel forever.
So
No.
you are
I will
comfortable.
always
So just
support Israel.
FYI, this guy just said goodbye
Always
to
support
Palestine.
Yes.
Israel.
So you just said goodbye to Palestine. So you are
Goodbye.
saying you are comfortable with the murder of thousands of children.
The Jewish people will never
You are
suffer
not
again
answering the question.
under Palestinian terrorism, under Hamas,
Wow.
under Hezbollah.
What about
Israel will be secure
30,000
forever.
innocent
God
civilians?
bless Israel forever.
Thank
Why
you
does he
for
want to wipe Palestine off the earth? Yeah?
God bless Israel forever.
Hey, at the very least, I mean, I have to commend him on his honesty. I mean, he was just fully putting it out there. He supports genocide. He wants to see Palestine gone. He said goodbye to Palestine. So, yeah, by the way, I guess I didn't mention that. That was Chuck Fleischman. I guess I mentioned it at the start of the show here. That was a congressional representative from District 3 of the good state of Tennessee. And yes, after some Code Pink protesters, one of them at least being Palestinian himself, asked Tennessee Congressional Representative Chuck Fleischman about his support for Israel on March 6th. This representative, not only refused to engage in any semblance of coherent discussion with them, he also advocated for the destruction of Palestine as a whole, saying, quote unquote, goodbye to Palestine. Not only is this guy a genocidal freak, he's also a corrupt genocidal freak. According to Open Secrets, this asshole took $10,000 from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee's PAC in the last election cycle. Now, he's reported no contributions from AIPAC in the current election cycle, but I'm sure a video like this is going to encourage that group to start making it rain on him. This instance of corruption is yet another demonstration of how we live in an unnatural state of affairs. Wealthy special interests buy out our politicians to ensure that they do the bidding of the ruling class, not the bidding of their constituents. Alrighty, let's move on now. Oof, I'm slipping off the armrest of my chair there. Let's move on now to a more local topic. So, Murfreesboro Mayor Shane McFarland once again faces legal troubles. So I did a long segment last month about a dumb tweet from Mayor Shane McFarland and the irony of its timing, given he claimed to care about taxpayers' burdens on the same day the ACLU settled out of court with the city of Murfreesboro over an authoritarian ordinance that he was a strong advocate for. Well, a month later, this guy, once again, is facing legal troubles. This report comes from the Daily News Journal on March 11th. Quote, the Murfreesboro and Smyrna mayors soon will face Tennessee officials about a campaign finance audit and investigation request from State Representative Robert Stevens. The Tennessee Registry of Election Finance will review the audit and investigation request during a 9:30 a.m. March 26th meeting at the Tennessee Tower in downtown Nashville, confirmed Bill Young, the executive director for the registry. Stevens is a second-year Republican state lawmaker from Smyrna and a former 12-year member of the Rutherford County Commission. he wrote the Registry a January 25th letter pertaining to a $7,500 donation from Murfreesboro Mayor Shane McFarland on November 23rd, 2022, to Tennesseans for Greater Accountability, a political action committee. The PAC then, quote, on the exact same day, unquote, donated $7,500 to the campaign account of Smyrna Mayor Mary Esther Reed. Quote, the Registry's own rules and factors for consideration support the conclusion that this $7,500 transfer was, in fact, a contribution from Mayor McFarland to Mayor Reed, using the PAC as a conduit to circumvent the individual contribution limit of $1,600, Stephen wrote in his letter to the Registry. Stevens, who's also an attorney, sent the letter prior to Smyrna voters considering a referendum March 5th, supported by Mayor Reeves, on whether to eliminate a town general sessions court, unquote. Side note, the vote didn't pass. Quote, his sister, Judge Brittany Stevens, presides over the court after waiting her 8-year term, August 2022, when he won the GOP primary for his state lawmaker seat, unquote. It's this relationship that Smyrna Mayor Mary Esther Reed is using to refute the accusation. Quote, in 2022, I received a check from a political action committee that was legal and under the maximum contribution level. I believe this attack by State Representative Robert Stevens has nothing to do with his concern over a PAC contribution to my campaign and everything to do with the controversy surrounding the March 5th Smyrna referendum of the town's voters to repeal the criminal general sessions jurisdiction of our court. The real reason, I suspect, this PAC contribution from 2 years ago concerns him now is because the representative's sister is the judge who would not be guaranteed another term beyond 2030 if the Smyrna voters pass the referendum. I believe that Representative Stevens is using his position as a state representative in an attempt to weaponize state agencies because of a personal vendetta and political posturing for the monetary benefit of his immediate family member. I'm exploring my options with the proper Tennessee authorities regarding his actions and behaviors, unquote. And, of course, McFarland backs up his alleged partner in crime. Quote, McFarland, through a text message to the Daily News Journal, also contends his contribution to the PAC in question at the request of a friend was legal. Quote, it looks like I'm being drugged into the Smyrna court referendum argument by Representative Stevens in an effort to make Mayor Reed look bad, McFarland said. It's incumbent on elected officials to admit if we make mistakes, and I have made my fair share. I have always been upfront with anything I have ever done, and if I made or make a mistake, it will never be intentional, and I will own it and fix that mistake. This example is no different, unquote. That's funny. He's claiming that he owns and fixes mistakes because, as far as I've seen, he has made no public comment on the city's settlement with the ACLU for the attempted ban on drag performances in public spaces. Neither has he apologized for his racist and anti-immigrant tweets he recently made, which, again, I covered about a month ago. So, if the audit finds illegal campaign contributions from him to the Smyrna mayor, I won't be expecting any kind of public statement from him. Now, according to this article, it's not like Representative Stevens has been afraid of holding mayors accountable to Tennessee campaign finance law. Apparently, he requested that the Tennessee Registry of Election Finance audit a former Rutherford County mayor in 2019, and they found 474 violations of the law. In this case, with Mayor Shane McFarland and Mary Esther Reed, Stephen wrote in his letter to the Registry, quote, at the time of the PAC's $7,500 contribution to Mayor Reed on November 23, 2022, the transfer from the PAC to her campaign account would not have been possible without Mayor McFarland's identical $7,500 contribution to the PAC, as the PAC would have had less than $800 available in its bank account, the letter from Stevens said. The percentage of available funds given the PAC to Mary Esther Reed for mayor on November 23rd, 2022 was therefore greater than 90% of its available cash on hand, unquote. Turns out, too, the so-called nonpartisan mayor of Murfreesboro donated $500 to the Tennessee Republican Party federal election account in 2014 and another $100 to WindRed in 2020, which is the Republican Party's grassroots fundraising platform, much similar to like what the Democratic Party has. Move on. You get the picture. So, in any case you needed any more evidence of our mayor's political leanings, you got some cold hard facts now. There's no need to buy the bullshit claim to nonpartisanship that he keeps implying. But on top of that, Representative Stevens' letter also claims that 7 violations of campaign finance law from Mayor McFarland were detected. This includes, quote, 5 individual contributions reported by McFarland in 2022 on June 16th and June 20th to the Murfreesboro mayor of $2,500 each, which exceeds the legally permissible maximum amount by $900. 2 individual contributions reported by McFarland in 2022 on June 16th and June 21st to the Murfreesboro mayor of $2,000 each, which exceeds the legally permissible maximum amount by $400, unquote. So even with our relatively lax campaign finance laws, Mayor Shane McFarland may have violated those. I can't. I can't even. Now, I also want to make it clear that this Representative Stevens is not really an angel when it comes to ethical campaign financing. Legal? Sure. But in the age of Citizens United and lax campaign finance laws, that's a low bar to meet. He says in his letter, quote, "As a public official myself, I believe that transparency in campaign finances is essential for the public to be able to make informed decisions. I also believe we should conduct ourselves with honesty, integrity, and accountability to ensure that our constituents receive the good government that they expect and deserve from us. It is in this spirit that I am asking the Registry to investigate these matters," unquote. That sounds nice, but when you look up his records on the Tennessee Online Campaign Finance Database, you'll see that he doesn't really care about accountability to his constituents. The overwhelming majority of his donations are more than $200. So, like, I know some of these are like $100 or $150, but then you start scrolling down here, you find, oh, wow, he's also got a lot of donations that way more than $200, which is at least at the federal level, that's usually what is considered more than a small individual contribution. Then you've also got like this record right here. This is from July 12th, 2023. I mean, not even one donation under $200. Even based off those records that I found right there, yeah, I mean, it's very clear, like, he really does not care about ensuring that his donations come from a variety of constituents, some of which who might not have the kind of money to donate that clearly his wealthier donors have. The overwhelming majority of his donations are more than $200, meaning the majority of his money comes from large individual contributions, not working class individuals who can only afford small donations. He may be doing things by the book, but that means jack when the book doesn't have proper restraints on him that would actually ensure he's representing the interests of the people, not just those of wealthy individuals and corporations. So for those who don't know, I am a competitor on Middle Tennessee State University's debate team, and we actually had our state championship last weekend down at Cleveland State Community College. And while I did get my butt kicked in the actual debate competitions, normally I win at least like one round, but this time around I won 0 zilch nada rounds, and yeah, that was kind of a bummer. But the good news is we also have our individual events, And I did pretty well in those. So we have like a lot of different categories that we all compete in. I competed in radio broadcast, persuasion, and impromptu. And I am pleased to announce that your big dog here got 4th place in persuasion out of like 15 to 20 competitors, and 2nd place in radio broadcast with like 20 to 25 competitors. So yeah, it was pretty cool, especially considering radio broadcast. That was actually the first time, at least in the collegiate realm, that I actually competed in a radio broadcast category at a speech team. I did do it a lot back in high school, though the guidelines were a lot different. We were given like a day to prepare our radio broadcast segments. But anyways, yeah, so it was pretty cool to see that I kind of won that after literally like my first time just competing in that category. Again, at least here in Tennessee at the collegiate level. However, though, what I normally like to do with my persuasion speeches is after I'm done competing with them, I'll record them and either, share them on my podcast or, in this case, broadcast it. So for the most part, this is the speech that I gave. It's a speech on Medicare for All. It's titled A Just Healthcare System. And yeah, I have changed a few parts of it because it's a persuasion speech. And the thing is, you literally, it's like in the rules, you need to give like some kind of call to action, which is not really compatible with nonprofit student radio because, yeah, the FCC doesn't like it whenever we do those call to action things. On top of that, just because of station policy, I also will have to censor out any mentions of prices, even references to percentages. So if you hear random bleeps, that's not me cursing. That's me adhering to station policies. So yay. But anyways, nonetheless, I still wanted to do this speech because I think it's a pretty, pretty compelling argument for why we need the establishment of a single payer healthcare system here in the United States. Because right now, we're getting fucked over by our multi-payer healthcare system. It's an absolute fucking scam. So yeah, anyways, without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, one last note. Normally the speech is supposed to be memorized, but because it is fucking late and because I've also made a few changes to make sure that I'm not doing like any calls to action or anything like that, I'm going to be reading off this. So I wish I could be making eye contact to you lovely individuals through this camera right now and staring deeply into your soul as I rant to you about the scam that our healthcare system is. But unfortunately, I got to have my notes. 11 out of 11. This is the ranking that the U.S. healthcare system has repeatedly been awarded by the Commonwealth Fund's Mere studies, which compare our healthcare system with that of 10 other high-income nations. This finding is especially troubling when considering that these same studies reported that the U.S. spends the highest percentage of its GDP on healthcare. Further, the U.S. Census reported that nearly 28.2 million Americans lacked any form of health insurance in 2021. These findings reveal a depressing truth. Our healthcare system sucks. So today, I'd like to examine a hotly debated policy, Medicare for All, which aims to provide a single-payer healthcare system like those found in nearly every other developed country. I'll examine what Medicare for All actually is, demonstrate why its passage is necessary, and provide ways in which you can join the fight for a just healthcare system. So, what is Medicare for All exactly? Doctors Abdul El Sayed and Micah Johnson provide a detailed answer to this question in their book, Medicare for All, A Citizen's Guide, outlining 6 active ingredients that power a Medicare for All bill. Universal coverage, the first active ingredient. Well, it's exactly what it suggests. Every citizen gets covered, eliminating the estimated 28.2 million instances of uninsurance. In 2022, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that nearly 212,000 lives could have been saved at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic had we implemented a single-payer healthcare system, attributing all of these additional deaths to high uninsurance rates. Not only would universal coverage guarantee access to healthcare for every U.S. citizen, but it would also ensure that we as a nation are better prepared for the next pandemic. Of course, universal coverage would be meaningless without the second active ingredient, comprehensive coverage. So all services currently ignored by today's Medicare plans like dental, hearing, and eye care would be covered. Now, these ideals sound expensive. That's why the third active ingredient, pricing power, is crucial to keeping costs low. In 2020, the Kaiser Family Foundation found that private insurers pay about 40% more for physician services and nearly twice more for hospital services than Medicare. Why? Medicare covers a massive number of patients, nearly 60 million in 2021, according to the U.S. Census. The more beneficiaries that an insurer covers, the more negotiating power it obtains for lower prices. If Medicare covered every U.S. citizen, it would therefore obtain massive negotiating power for lower prices. The fourth active ingredient, increased administrative efficiency, would also lower costs under a Medicare for All plan. Today, healthcare facilities have to waste their budgets on armies of personnel to accommodate for numerous insurance plans. A 2014 study from the Health Affairs Journal compared hospital administrative costs across 8 different nations, finding that U.S. hospitals spend the highest percentage of their budgets on administrative costs. My dad's wallet was actually recently hurt by this lack of efficiency. After I received treatment for over a year from a relatively new psychiatry office in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, I was served a bill for over $800 for the services I received, despite having paid for them already. Why? The accounting process is incredibly convoluted at my doctor's office, as the office has to calculate the cost for services after insurance coverage kicks in, then get the services approved by my insurer, which can take multiple weeks, and then everyone has to cross their fingers and hope that nothing goes wrong. This convoluted administration process raises prices for both providers and patients. Medicare for All also relies on progressive financing, the fifth active ingredient. Right now, we rely on the opposite, regressive financing, where poorer folks pay a larger percentage of their income for healthcare than wealthy individuals. In 2022, the Peterson Kaiser Family Foundation Health System Tracker reported that families earning 199% or less of the federal poverty level paid 10.4% of their income for health care, while families earning 399% or more of the federal poverty level only paid 3.5%. Medicare for All would reverse this trend with progressive financing. The greater your income, the more you pay. The final active ingredient, public accountability, addresses the rotten core of our multi-payer healthcare system. Today, insurance companies aren't accountable to you. They're accountable to their shareholders, who demand the highest profits for themselves, not the best treatment for you. The story of Penn State student Christopher McNaughton best serves as an example of this problem. A February 2nd, 2023 ProPublica article depicts McNaughton's struggle to get the costs of his ulcerative colitis treatment covered by his insurer, United Healthcare, reporting that, quote, officials calculated what McNaughton was costing them to keep his crippling disease at bay and how much they would save if they forced him to undergo a cheaper treatment that had already failed him. As this story shows, private insurance companies prioritize profits over quality healthcare, harming patients in their most vulnerable moments. Under a Medicare for All plan, your insurer, Medicare, would be accountable to you, not to some greedy shareholders. But why is this the necessary reform to our current healthcare system? I can't cover all of the proposed alternatives due to time constraints. Otherwise, we'd be here an incredibly long time. But I'll address the big one, the public option, an affordable insurance plan offered by the federal government. While the writers of Medicare for All, A Citizen's Guide, note that the public option would require a smaller tax increase and could feature some of Medicare for All's active ingredients, in all cases, it would still lack two necessities: universal coverage, the first active ingredient, and increased administrative efficiency, the fourth active ingredient. Universal coverage can't occur because you still have to pay monthly premiums, which some people might not be able to afford. And because a fragmented private insurance market would still exist under a public option, healthcare facilities in the U.S. would still have to waste their budgets on armies of personnel. So you won't get increased administrative efficiency either. Neither of those two components can ever occur under a public option. It's these shortcomings of the public option that demonstrate the ultimate strength of Medicare for All. Today, we treat healthcare as a commodity, as a product that we can shop around for, that we're fully informed about when purchasing, that we can even choose whether to purchase. Wouldn't it be better to treat healthcare as a public good available to every citizen, the same way we treat our police services, our fire departments, our public schools, and really all of our infrastructure? If it's true that we need all of those services to thrive as a society, then wouldn't we also need universal access to services that ensure our physical and mental well-being? So, do you want a healthcare system that provides a comprehensive reformation and not just some minor tweaks around the edges? If so, then I've got two ways in which you can join the fight for a just healthcare system. Number one, voting. And careful voting, I might add. There are many corporatist Democrats, probably swimming in donations from insurance company executives, who will try to trick you by proclaiming, "I believe healthcare is a human right," without stating what actual policies they'd fight for. If they're not specifically saying on their campaign page that they'll support a single-payer healthcare plan, that means you don't know what the hell they'll actually support. 2, joining an advocacy group. Now, I do my part by participating in my school's Young Democratic Socialist of America chapter, but if you don't agree with that organization's other stances, there are still other Medicare for All focused groups like Healthcare Now that you can join. Now, I hope you're not mistaking my optimism as a guarantee of ease. This is a years-long uphill battle, one in which an organized grassroots coalition must combat private insurance companies' abilities to employ disinformation campaigns, hire lobbyists, and ultimately buy out our politicians. But it's a righteous fight to wage, as uninsured people's lives remain threatened the longer this status quo exists. By wielding your voice in the democratic process and organizing with like-minded individuals on this specific issue, you can help ensure the establishment of a just healthcare system in the United States. Thank you. Yeah, initially when I started recording this, I was thinking, oh yeah, I can do this from memory real late at night. And no, that was absolutely not possible. Either it's the sleep deprivation or it's or it's just the fact that I'm sitting down in my chair, not doing my usual thing where I stand up and walk around. But I'm willing to bet that it's probably the sleep deprivation. So on that note, that's the last segment I'm recording for today's show. I still have one more segment for you that I've already recorded from last week. Again, I just had to cut the damn thing out. But before I finish this segment, though, I would like to extend my thanks to Coach Pat. He kind of handles the debate side of things, and also Coach Natanya for kind of guiding me in this whole process of writing this speech. I kind of had it easy the first time around whenever I did Persuasion last year, because I basically came in with this speech that I already wrote for my was it Rhetoric and Argument? Yeah, I think it was called Rhetoric and Argument class back at Henderson. So this is the first time I really had to write a speech with this event in mind. It was kind of weird. I didn't really write that first speech with like the guidelines for the persuasion category in mind, obviously, but it just kind of magically fit into that. I did have to cut out a few things, but still, it was like already like pretty much good to go. Just needed a few edits. So this is the first time around I really had to kind of write a speech like this on my own without needing a teacher to light a fire under my ass. So I definitely appreciate Natanya's help in having to write this, helping me write this speech. So also want to extend thanks to all of our team leaders, like our captain, Joey Mago, vice president, Liam Boardwine, and our communications coordinator, Mara Chance, and just really everyone on the team. I think we had a pretty good showing at the Cleveland State tournament. I believe, and I might be wrong on this, I think we got second place, like overall as a team, out of the 4-year colleges, and then third place in the overall sweepstakes. I think I know we got second place in one of those categories and third place in another one of those categories. I can't remember which one though, because my God, it is late as fuck right now, and I got to get editing on this recording so I can have it ready for broadcast by tomorrow morning. So, alrighty. So, finally, I wanted to do a quick review of Ryan Grimm's new book. It's the Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution. So over the winter break, I had the pleasure to read this new book from Ryan Grimm. Again, it's called The Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution. And for those who don't know, Ryan Grimm is the DC bureau chief at The Intercept, which is a nonprofit news outlet that has been doing exceptional work recently, especially on their coverage of Israel's ongoing genocide of the people of Gaza. Ryan Grimm also hosts the Counterpoints podcast, which is a weekly supplemental podcast that's produced by the folks at Breaking Points. He also hosts the Intercept's Deconstructed podcast, and he also has a Substack page aptly titled Ryan Grimm. He does a lot of great work, and as soon as I saw that he was writing a book that charts the trajectory of the Squad's rise to power, I was immediately interested, and I picked up the Kindle version. They also had this deal going on where you could like get the audiobook version with it too. I actually ended up listening to most of it. I thought it was just a better book that was enjoyed over the audiobook format. Overall, though, I think the book or audiobook is a great read or listen, especially for anyone who, like me, wasn't keeping a close eye on political news events during the Squad's rise to power and early years in office. It's also a very timely read. The book ends up examining how the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and Democratic Majority for Israel, DMFI, played a massive oppositional role towards the progressive legislators, a dynamic that's really expanded since the October 7th attacks. The book even examines why now Senator John Fetterman has been so oppositional to folks who are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. It's an enlightening retrospective, but I want to note a couple of moments in the book that personally resounded with me. The first one that I want to note is his thorough retelling of the behind-the-scenes drama with the 2020 Bernie Sanders campaign. Grimm makes it abundantly clear that the DNC establishment had their knives out for Sanders. Now, here's a brief excerpt from the book that demonstrates the absolute power of the DNC establishment. Quote, former President Obama, leading the pushback by the party establishment, began making calls. Pete Buttigieg dropped out the day after South Carolina, flying back to South Bend rather than to Dallas for a rally. He spoke to both Biden and Obama that night. Biden said publicly he had offered Buttigieg a job. Quote, "I warned him that if I get elected, I'm coming for him," as Biden put it, meaning he'd recruit Buttigieg into the administration, not that he'd attack him. That's called a quid pro quo, right? Trump needled the White House press corps fresh off his impeachment. Obama, too, encouraged Buttigieg to use his leverage. Buttigieg endorsed Biden the next day, as did former candidate Beto O'Rourke. Amy Klobuchar also dropped out and endorsed Biden. Shakir, the Sanders campaign manager, could see on Sanders' face as he took the call from Klobuchar that the power of the establishment was on the move. The endorsements themselves may not have been enough to do it, but the tenor of the news coverage shifted radically, with endless airtime being given to the historic consolidation. Critical mention, a media monitoring firm, established that Biden was on the receiving end of nearly $72 million in favorable media coverage in the days between South Carolina and Super Tuesday. And this was aside from the millions spent by Bloomberg to bash Sanders. Democratic voters who are highly tuned into the political news cycle got the message. And although the day has gone down as a Sanders wipeout, and the moment when Biden put the race away, it very nearly did not. Biden easily carried Alabama, Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and, to a lesser degree, Oklahoma. But he won Texas by fewer than 5 points, and Sanders had been pulling ahead there since before Nevada. Sanders won easily in California, Colorado, Utah, and Vermont. Biden won by just 1 point in Maine. Sanders lost Maine by roughly the number of votes won by Tulsi Gabbard, who had endorsed him in 2016 but declined to drop out in 2020 and endorse him. She later left the Democratic Party. But the backbreaker for Sanders came in Massachusetts, where he had rallied and where he hoped the state's progressive electorate would turn out for him. Before the consolidation, he had led nearly every poll there, with Biden far behind. Now, Biden carried the state 33% to 27%, with Warren finishing third in her home state with 21%. Minnesota went for Biden 39-30 after Klobuchar dropped out. A poll prior to the consolidation had Sanders up by 5 points. Had the party leadership not consolidated behind Biden, of the 14 Super Tuesday states, Sanders would have carried California, Texas, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Utah, and Vermont, as well as a likely win in Oklahoma, leaving Biden just the southern states. But they did consolidate, and Sanders went from expecting to have an insurmountable delegate lead to having an insurmountable deficit. Okay, that was more than the paragraph, but still, I thought all of that was really telling and really informative. After reading that, I feel like I have a much greater awareness of how incredibly difficult it is to challenge the power of the DNC from the left. Bernie was on absolute fire at the start of the 2020 primaries. At the time, I didn't keep up with current events. I mostly filled up my social media feeds with entertainment news and news commentary, again, on the entertainment industry. But even then, people who didn't normally comment on politics were talking about Bernie Sanders. I remember sitting in the dining hall at my former university and clicking on a video from Review Tech USA, a YouTuber who used to produce a mix of political, tech, and gaming news commentary videos. Seeing how YouTube started to deprioritize political commentary videos and its algorithms, he rarely made any videos about politics at the time. But even he decided to make a video celebrating Sanders' electoral win and bashing an MSNBC pundit's comparison of Sanders' victories to the fall of France in World War II, to the Nazis. Despite that popular support, though, it's devastating to see how that entire movement collapsed because of some backslapping status quo defenders within the DNC. And while it does make me feel all the more nihilistic about the chance for a breakthrough of progressive power in the DNC, I also feel like I now have a more realistic understanding of how steep of an uphill battle that breakthrough will be. Now, second, I want to really, really commend him on his examination of the Force the Vote movement. Now, you're probably wondering, like, what the hell that is. So Force the Vote was an online movement that started in late November of 2020, a little over a month before the new set of House representatives were set to vote for a new Speaker of the House. Force the Vote was inspired by YouTube comedian and political commentator Jimmy Dore, who called on House progressives to force a vote on Medicare for All by threatening to withhold their votes for then House Speaker candidate Nancy Pelosi, unless she would agree to put Medicare for All up for a vote. A bill which had been sitting on her desk for quite some time. I think 2 years, but I can't remember for sure. Obviously, it's been a while since all this happened. Now, side note, at the time, Jimmy Dore, to me at least, seemed like a genuine, well-meaning progressive. In recent years, he's definitely fallen down the rabbit hole. Not only did he start to promote COVID-19 vaccine conspiracy theories, but he especially lost me after he once argued that Trump was a more anti-war president than Biden. Despite all my issues with Biden's handling of our relationship with Israel, it's virtually impossible to argue that Trump's presidency featured more anti-war actions and policies than Biden's, when Trump literally almost sparked World War III by taking out an Iranian general. Anyways, Jimmy Dore is not a YouTuber I watch anymore, nor have I watched any of his videos for a long time now. He will not provide you with thoughtful or funny commentary. If you check his stuff out now, rest assured. Nonetheless, at the time he had me sold on the Force the Vote movement. It was a movement that started right as I started consuming political news content, especially from Kyle Kulinski, host of Secular Talk, and it was an inspiring moment for me. I was trapped inside the house as a pandemic raged about, as we were still waiting for the vaccines to get out the door. I was looking for something to do, so I got involved with Force the Vote, joining the group's Slack server to support the effort. After joining some group video calls with random people, I ended up becoming the social media coordinator. Thanks to the help of some activists with a niche following, I was able to get about 2,000 accounts to follow the Force the Vote Twitter page. I spent just about that entire Christmas break scheduling a bunch of posts tagging different progressive representatives. It was a wild time. Of course, there's a reason why you probably never heard of Force the Vote. The idea was quickly dismissed by the representatives targeted by the movement. On top of that, it's really difficult to maintain solidarity amongst a group of a bunch of random lefties who all have their different opinions about strategy, policy, and just a variety of a lot of different topics. Probably didn't help that we were all pent up inside our homes either. I think there was definitely some pent up sadness, rage, anger over that. But on top of that, there simply wasn't enough time to harness the organizing and attention that we needed to obtain our goal, if they were ever obtainable in the first place. And up until I read this book, again, The Squad, AOC and the Hope of a Political Revolution, up until I read this book, despite all my problems with Jimmy Dore and knowing all the problems with trying to organize online in the time frame that we had, I still held that it would have been a better move for House progressives to do what we said, threaten to withhold their votes for Nancy Pelosi unless they got a promise to put Medicare for All up to a vote. But I have to admit, I think Grimm did an excellent job explaining why it wouldn't have been a good idea at the time. Here's the excerpt that changed my mind. Quote, I asked Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal why they decided against asking for a vote on Medicare for All. Quote, well, I'm sympathetic, obviously, as lead sponsor of the bill, to people who are frustrated that we have not moved to a single-payer system yet, she told me. Quote, but the reality is, this is a very slim margin. The vote for Speaker was between Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi, and throwing the entire chamber into chaos would have been very detrimental for the Electoral College vote and everything else, unquote. Jayapal's critics blasted her, arguing that as long as Pelosi's opponents voted for somebody other than McCarthy, McCarthy couldn't become Speaker, and the vote would be deadlocked until somebody blinked. But that's not what Jayapal was saying, as the second half of her sentence was missed. The vote for Speaker was scheduled for January 3rd, the rules package for January 4th, the Georgia Senate runoffs for January 5th, and the certification of the Electoral College votes on January 6th. 2 years later, watching right-wing Republicans hold up Kevin McCarthy's election to the speakership for a week, advocates of the force the vote idea were convinced they had been dead right the last time and that the squad deserved all the scorn that had been sent their way. But Jayapal's point is worth considering. If the squad had withheld their votes and pushed the vote to the next day, January 4th, would they have had more leverage or less? Now, imagine if they had held firm, like the Freedom Caucus Republicans, and pushed it to January 5th. The House would have been required to certify Biden's win the next day. How much popular support would the squad have had in blocking that from happening as tens of thousands of Trump supporters marshaled in Washington? Unquote. What I appreciate about Ryan Grimm's writing here is that he addresses a core misunderstanding of force the vote. At the time, and I'm sure this sounds wild to say, the rumors about the impending January 6th riots were relative background noise to us, at least from what I remember. Sure, we had heard the rumors, but we were naive enough to think it wasn't actually going to turn into a full-blown riot. Considering how bad it would have made those House progressives look in the public eye, holding up the election certification process as an impending riot was about to occur at the Capitol, yeah, their hesitation is understandable. Granted, I think there may be another debate to have about whether delaying that vote would have just made the Stop the Steal guys want to riot on the same day that the certification process would have taken place, which, I mean, who knows what that day would have been, but I think there is another debate to have about that as to whether or not they would have just delayed their riot until the day that the certification process got delayed too. But nonetheless, with everyone on edge about whether the election was even going to be certified, yeah, it was probably a better move to wait for another opportunity to exercise that power so we could breathe a sigh of relief about the continuance of our democracy. So my hat's off, or my headphones off to Ryan Grimm for his work. You can probably find a copy of The Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution through the library's interlibrary loan system. It's great. I've used it before. They get you those books real fast from other libraries. Or if you want to be like me, you can support Mr. Grimm's work by picking up a copy of the book or audiobook through, whatever store or digital platform that you prefer. Hey friend, that's all I've got for today, but thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of The Unnatural State of Affairs. The Unnatural State of Affairs broadcasts on WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee from 8 to 10 a.m. on Thursdays. The broadcasted version is censored, but I do also have a full DJ hour in the broadcasted version. I mostly play punk rock music and some rap music as well. And if you can't tune in at that time, though, you can also find the uncensored versions of all my talk show segments that day on my Substack, The Kennel, and you can also find audio-only versions on Spotify. If you liked what I had to say, hit that like button. If you have any thoughts that you want to share, hit me up in the comments section down below. And if you want to be notified of the next upload that I make, hit that subscribe button. You'll get an email in your inbox the next time I make an upload, and you'll also get a notification through the Substack app if you have that on your device. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good one.